Discerning Hearts provides content dedicated to those on the spiritual journey. To continue production of these videos, prayers, and more, go to discerninghearts.com and click the donate link found there or inside the free Discerning Hearts app to make your donation. Thanks, and God bless.
DiscerningHearts.com presents Building a Kingdom of Love, Reflections with Msgr John Esseff. Msgr Esseff is a priest of the Diocese of Scranton, Pennsylvania. He has served as a retreat director and confessor to Saint Teresa of Calcutta. He continues to offer direction and retreats for the Sisters of the Missionaries of Charity. Msgr Esseff encountered Saint Padre Pio, who would become a spiritual father to him. He has lived in areas around the world, serving in the Pontifical Missions, a Catholic organization established by Pope St. John Paul II to bring the good news to the world, especially to the poor. He continues to serve as a retreat leader and director to bishops, priests, and sisters, seminarians, and other religious leaders. Building a Kingdom of Love, Reflections with Msgr John Esseff. I'm your host, Chris McGregor. So what's on your heart today, Msgr?
A great saint is the feast day today, Saint Charbel Makhlouf. And I have more than just a casual relationship with this saint whose feast day is today. He's an Eastern Rite saint. He comes from Mount Lebanon. He's a Maronite. He belongs to an Eastern Rite, and he's been extended to the Universal Church as a saint. And so all over the world today, we're honoring Saint Charbel Makhlouf from Anaya, Lebanon. I went to Lebanon as the Pontifical Mission Director. And when I got there, people so much wanted me to meet and to go to his shrine in Anaya. And I had heard so much about him in my past. My grandfather, who was an immigrant from Lebanon, would always tell me about two saints, Saint Charbel Makhlouf and Saint Nimatullah Kassab el-Khardini. And the interest in Saint Charbel for my grandfather was because his teacher in the seminary was Saint Nimatullah Kassab el-Khardini. And Khardini means he came from the same village that my grandfather came from. And so he was so proud to think that this saint had gone and had become a saint. And he was always talking to me about these two holy men. Actually, Saint Nimatullah Kassab, who isn't as well known as Saint Charbel, was the teacher of Saint Charbel. So that when Saint Charbel was in the seminary, there was a need for the reform of seminaries, because what was happening in Lebanon is priests were being ordained and they were more like the people around them. They were, and the priest had lost that leadership, that knowledge of God, that holiness. One of the reformers in the Maronite seminary at that time was Saint Nimatullah Kassab el-Khardini. So that, I just was so attached as my life has gone on to just let you know about that other saint who taught Saint Charbel and who was the one who was teaching him about God and about prayer. And as a Maronite monk, then Saint Charbel was ordained and went into his mission, which was prayer, and was supposed to be, but then he became the bursar, a man of tremendous administrative and organizational ability. It was soon recognized that he had these graces and these strengths. And the order was really saddened when he said, no, I'm renouncing. And you have to kind of know what power there is. One of the biggest resources of land in Lebanon are the monks. They have inherited this land, and they are the owners. So that land, which is wealth, and because of this tiny little country, is much in the hands of the monks. And they have all these fields, and they have all these inheritances which belong to the Maronite order. And they're a powerful order, and they're a very wealthy order. Charbel resigns, goes into the hills, into a hermitage, with the permission of his superiors, and for 27 years prays and fasts and gets to know God. In today's reading, I thought it was so powerful and fitting when to this Eastern Church and to the Western Church on his feast today, God speaks through the mouth of Jeremiah. And all of you who are Eastern Rite and all of you who are Western Rite, I'm particularly speaking not only to the Catholics of the East, but I'm also speaking to the Orthodox of the East. You have inherited the Church. Your leadership and your love of God and your love of Jesus Christ is so much in your hands. Millions and millions in the East are Orthodox, and the Church has been split from the Orthodox to the Roman Catholic in the West. But it's a political thing, and it's existed for almost 1,000 years. But who is the founder of the Orthodox Church? Jesus Christ. Who is the love of the Orthodox Church? Whose suffering, death, and resurrection do you celebrate in the Eucharist and the Divine Liturgy? Jesus Christ. The foundation of the Church is Jesus. Into whom are you baptized? Into whom are you confirmed? And whose flesh and blood do you eat? Every member, whether you're Russian Orthodox, whether you're whatever order or Eastern Church you are, this is for you. And listen to the words of Jeremiah. I brought you into the garden land to eat its fine fruits, but you entered and defiled my land. You turned my heritage into an abomination. The priest did not ask, where is the Lord? The experts in the law did not know me. The shepherds rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal, by the false gods, and went after useless idols. What are the idols? Just the same in the East as they are in the West. Power, money, prestige, honor, pleasure. These are false gods of this world. And when the metropolitans and when the patriarchs start dressing up with all this power and want this prestige, over and over again, I was born in the Eastern Rite, and I know the hearts of many people who are really suspicious of their leaders because all they seem to think of is money and honor and positions of power. At least they have very few who really search for this. Saint Charbel is now given to us as not only a saint of the East, but a saint of the West and a saint of the whole world. And so I would like to address on his feast some of the experience I had. In 1984, I was stationed in Lebanon as the director of the Pontifical Mission. And as soon as I arrived, the people very much wanted me to visit the tomb and to see his place there at a shrine. And so I went, and I heard over and over again the story. Saint Charbel was born in 1828. He died in 1898. Pope John Paul canonized Charbel in 1978. But the history of his life, for 27 years, he had gone and he had been in a monastery. And I remember one day when I was there, after I had grown in this devotion to this holy man, that because after 50 years, in 1948, his tomb, where he had been buried, was glowing at night. The people would come and bring their babies, Muslims, Christians, anyone, Orthodox. They came, and Saint Charbel, long before he was canonized, was such a drawing magnet to where he was buried. And they dug up his body, and it was incorrupt. And so many miracles and power happened even after his death. And so one day, I remember I was there, and because of the war, and because there was such an attack being made against Westerners who were in Lebanon. And at that time, it was a raging war. And so much, the bombs and the car bomb blasts and the just violence all over during this period of time. It was and I had arrived there in 84, 85, 86, and the war was just raging. And my superiors really believed that I was going to be killed or kidnapped, because this has happened to Western missionaries who were there. And so I was ordered out of Lebanon. And I remember before I left, it was during Holy Week, and I was giving a sermon to 1,000 Maronites. They had been displaced. They were refugees in their own country. And we were having Mass at a particular place. And while they were gathered there, I was preaching. At that same time, there was going to be elected the patriarch, and the whole country was abuzz. Who is going to be the patriarch? Because a Maronite patriarch is a powerful force in the Middle East. In fact, many of the patriarchs look to him as for spiritual leadership. He's a very powerful Eastern Rite patriarch. And so who is going to be the patriarch? Who is going to be the patriarch? That was the talk. And this is because this was going to make a great difference for the people who had suffered for years and years. The war had gone on 17, 18 years by this time, and people were suffering terribly. And the country was all divided up into different places, and the factions were all warring, and people had come in from other places, Iran and Libya and Syria, and the country was so divided and suffering. People were very much suffering. And who's going to be the patriarch? He will be our leader to lead us out of this morass and this suffering. And so at that Mass, I said, can anyone tell me here who the patriarch was during the days of Saint Charbel? And there were 1,000 Maronites there. And Saint Charbel died in 1898. Less than 100 years later, I'm asking the question, who was the patriarch during those days? And this would have been 1986 that I preached this. Not one person knew the name of the patriarch. After I preached that, I preached it again, and it was on Holy Thursday. I was again with 1,000 or even more of refugees, and I asked them, who was the patriarch during the days of Saint Charbel? And again, no one knew. And the point of my talk was, today, here we are at Mass. Christ is in our midst, in you. You are a suffering people. You're just like Jesus with your families, in exile in your own country, suffering terribly in different places, wherever you are, but Jesus is in you. It's more important to be a saint than to be the patriarch. And if there's going to be a leadership out of this terrible violence that we're in, it's that each one of us become holy like Charbel. I thought it was a very good sermon, and I just remember being satisfied that my point was made. The very next day, that day happened to be Holy Thursday, that Mass was televised. The next day, when I was at the Maronite monks' home having lunch with them on Good Friday, the one who was the postulator for Saint Charbel was having lunch with me, and he saw the public television coverage of that Mass, and he said, "I hear you want to know who the patriarch was during the days of Saint Charbel." I said, "Yes, I do. I'd be very interested to know because I really don't know." And he said to me, "Do you know they died the same day?" I said, "I didn't know that." "Yes," he said, "his name was Patriarch Hanna Haj. And when the patriarch died, he was going to be buried from Bakirki, which is the patriarchate center in Lebanon." He said, "Do you know how many attended?" 10,000 people. And do you know how many came to the saint's funeral? Because all of the monks had gone and left the monastery to go to celebrate the patriarch's funeral at Bakirki. And they all went to the monastery, and they left one priest behind. And that priest is the one who celebrated the Mass for the burial of Saint Charbel. In fact, they hired some people to bring his body down from the hermitage, his fasting, praying body that was so beaten and so with asceticism and prayer. That same body they brought to the monastery, and he was buried in the monastery garden. 50 years later, after his death, that tomb was lighted up during the night. It actually glowed, and people would come and pray there, and miracles would happen. A saint was buried here, and they dug up the body, and it was incorrupt. And further investigation was made of his life, his virtue, his union with Jesus Christ. Saint Charbel was then canonized in 1978 by John Paul. This saint of the Eastern Rite is now a glowing, shining sign all over the world. What is that which brings about healing, power, grace, and blessing in the Church? Listen again to Jeremiah. Jeremiah is so powerful in his teaching about what it is that we really must do with regard to be listened to by God. Be horrified at this, heavens. Shudder, be appalled. Two evils my people have done. They have forsaken me, source of living water. They have dug cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. We have abandoned the living God. We have dug cisterns for ourselves. We are drinking from honor and power and pleasure and reputation and money. And who is doing this? Listen, patriarchs, metropolitans, leaders of the Eastern Church. We have sinned. When there's such suffering in the Eastern Church right now, whether it's in Russia, in the Ukraine, whether it's in Lebanon, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Iran, whether it's wherever you are, the leadership in the church, if it doesn't turn around, then Charbel is the sign. Here is a priest who began to put God first. Are the priests asking, where is God? It's not the political forces and powers of the world, Brother Orthodox, Sister Orthodox, that's going to save our world. It's Jesus. It's Jesus in the church. Mother Olga, who was born in an Orthodox faith in Iraq, the dryness, the love that she had for the altar, for the Eucharist as a young girl, and her cleaning around the altar, the holiness of God, which she sought and rarely found in the priests, and especially in the leadership of the Orthodox Church, and right up to the patriarchs. Her witness and her example of seeking Christ. There are so many within the if you're a member of the Orthodox Church, what is your power? It's Jesus. You are the baptized. You are the confirmed. You eat his body and his blood. We have this power. Who is it? It's Jesus. Where is he in you? That ordinary lay person in the church, in prayer. When I was in Lebanon, I saw this Father Salah. He's a priest, and he was just a humble man when I first went there. And he was so holy, living in he was just virtue radiated from. At that time, he was a layman, and eventually he became ordained. He was only one, but there was a whole group of people with him. He belonged to these just ordinary lay people that I saw who went around in penitential garb, praying, and he and they have built hermitages in the mountains. Lebanon is holy, and it has some of the holiest people I have ever met. But much of its leadership is corrupt. Seeking power, it's not that way only in the East, it's that way in the West. You know, we have our Archbishop Weaklands, who corrupted, and he wrote his book. It's right out there for everyone to see. We have corrupt leaders in the West and in the United States. We have this Cardinal Bing, who is so running after money and wealth. He's so embarrassed now by the Pope, as the Pope goes and leads the church again in the way of holiness. What we need is holy, holy people to lead our priests and our metropolitans and our archbishops and our cardinals and our leaders back to God. Many times it doesn't happen with the top. The top sometimes are the last ones to be converted. Thank God for our Pope, who has become a sign to us of holiness and has been for 100 years. The leadership that we have, but so many are still corrupt. The Cardinal in the Vatican that absconded with all of that money and was caught and is now in prison. Thank God. Our sins are exposing us. But what is brought about what Jeremiah prophesied? Until we come back to God. Our Lord in the gospel today talks about, will our leadership learn? Maybe not. But will our people learn? Who are the people today? In the gospel today, they want to know, what is the meaning of the seed that is sown in the ground and overrun by things of this world, and only some seed is meant to flower and produce fruit? Then the disciples approached him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? He said to them in reply, because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but not to them. That it has been given and granted to you. To anyone who has more will be given. He will grow rich. From anyone who has not, that which he has will be taken away. There's so much suffering in the areas of the East now, where even the faith that they have for hundreds of millions in Russia and in China and in Vietnam, the suffering under communism, which Our Lady said would happen. Our leadership was so poor in these Orthodox areas of the Church. This is why I speak in parables, because they look but do not see. They hear but do not listen and understand. Isaiah prophesied well and is fulfilled in them when he says, you shall indeed hear but not understand. You shall indeed look but not see. Gross is the heart of this people. They will hardly hear with their ears. They have closed their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and be converted, and I heal them. The healing many times will come, as our Lord said, to those who are poor and small and little. When I met Mother Olga, her journey to the heart of Jesus, right into the deepest part of her church. Her journey is so amazing from an Orthodox church. The holiness and the power that is in each and every baptized Orthodox Christian. You have power. The love that is in every Maronite heart. You have power. Who is that? It is Jesus Christ. It's not in those who have sought the power and majesty of the world and those false cisterns that cannot satisfy. Those broken cisterns that many times we have gone after. Communism, Our Lady said at Fatima, is not with us because it is so powerful of itself. It is with us because it's a scourge being used by God to bring us back to God. Saint Charbel is being used by God to bring us back to God. A humble monk who silently for 27 years, like a seed, was buried in the ground with prayer, with fasting, hidden from the world. And now this patriarch, who had 10,000 people at his funeral, nobody knows his name. What are you living for if you are a patriarch, if you are a metropolitan, if you are an archbishop? Who is it that is life? None other than Jesus Christ. And that same Jesus is in you, an ordinary baptized lay person in the Orthodox Church. If you have been baptized and you are a Coptic Christian in Egypt, you are Jesus in the world today. And over again, you have suffered and you are dying. Learn who you are. Unite your sufferings, your pains with Jesus Christ. We need Jesus in the East and in the West. We need Saint Charbel in the East and in the West. And he will become, hopefully, a household word for the reform, not only of the Maronite order of Lebanese monks, but a reform not only for the patriarchs of the East, but he'll become a shining light today and through his life for the whole world.
Monsignor, Saint Charbel is considered by so many as to be the Padre Pio of Lebanon and maybe of the Middle East.
The sign, for Charbel was the incorrupt body when they dug him up, but also the glow around his and the miracles that would take place. Both these men are powerful. How? Because even their bodies are being used to bring grace and power to God. Your body is holy, and even therefore your gravesite becomes a place of holiness. And the tombs of those who have gone after things of this world are dead. And the tombs, just like Jesus, you can't bury the saint. The saint, even the body, there's this shining, glowing witness. It was, I think, his body that eventually the people, it was his tomb that became such a shining place for Charbel.
Final thought?
Be holy. Don't strive to be the top and the leader. And if you are the leader, be holy. Holiness is that which we are called to be. And what is holiness? Be Jesus. Be the one, first of all, who you are. And then, after that, do what God has called you to do, whatever that might be. But your first call is to be Christ. God bless.
You've been listening to Building a Kingdom of Love, Reflections with Monsignor John Esseff. To hear and or to download this conversation, along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, visit discerninghearts.com, or you can find it within the free Discerning Hearts app. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Chris McGregor. We hope that if this has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer rock-solid and authentic spiritual formation freely to souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for Building a Kingdom of Love, Reflections with Monsignor John Esseff.